Madam President.
Senator from Vermont.
Madam President, I hope the country have heard what the distinguished senior senator from Maryland said. He sees this every day. He sees it when he goes home to Baltimore. He sees it when he talks with his neighbors. He sees it when he's in the grocery store. He sees it at Temple. He sees it everywhere because these are the people who are among our finest government workers, and they're out of work. They're not being paid. And I suspect he also sees it with the contractors and subcontractors and those who are not on the federal payroll but lose their jobs if the federal government is closed. So I compliment him for doing this. I also appreciate what he said about the Appropriations Committee. The distinguished presiding officer is one of the hardest working chairs of an Appropriations Subcommittee. And I realize she cannot respond in a position as chair, but as presiding officer, but I would note that she moved her bill through. She did it in a way that got enormous support from Republicans and Democrats across the political spectrum, which is the way we're supposed to do. It certainly has been the way we've seen people from her state. We did with her father, we did with my dear friend Senator Stevens when he was chair of the Appropriations Committee. But we've seen it with when the distinguished senior senator from Maryland, when Senator Mikulski from his state was chair of that committee, of the overall committee. We got this done. It's a lot of work. It's tremendous work for our staff on both sides of the aisle, a lot of late nights, weekends, but it's done because you want the United States government to work. Well, frankly, when one person says the United States government should not work, that's wrong. In fact, for a month now, much of the federal government has been closed for business. Well, the President of the United States rants and raves about his personal obsession, the centerpiece of his extreme anti-immigration agenda, a wall on our southern border. And for a month now, hundreds of thousands of dedicated public servants have gone without a paycheck, even while many of them showed up for work every single day. Many can no longer pay their bills. They're worried about how they're going to put food on the table. Many are looking for temporary work. Many are standing in line at food pantries. These are professionals. They're trying to figure out, how do you pay for child care or health care? How do you keep up with student loans? How do you pay your mortgage? And it's not just the individuals, it's our institutions. Our federal courts are running out of money. Our federal courts are running out of money. TSA agents are calling in sick in droves after weeks on the job without pay. What is that doing with air traffic, especially during the winter in America? Thousands of people trying to buy new homes, which boosts our economy, or refinance with a Federal Housing Administration mortgage, have been told, come back later. Come back when? Well, we don't know. Whenever President Trump ends the shutdown, come back. Small businesses, farmers cannot get federally backed loans. This after this body, with the leadership of a distinguished Republican, Senator Roberts, a distinguished Democrat, Senator Stabenow, put through a 5-year farm bill, which brought almost all of us together in voting for it. But now, farmers can't use it. They don't even know what the new rules are because nobody is there to answer. We've scaled back on food inspections. Every one of us, when we see on the news that there's an outbreak of E. coli or something, we're like, oh, how could that happen? Well, it's going to happen a lot more. We can't even inspect our food. We're not enforcing our clean air and clean water rules. Our national parks are being vandalized and permanently damaged as they remain open to the public, but they're not staffed. And here is something, as a former prosecutor, this sends a chill down my spine. The FBI Agents Association says criminal investigations are being stymied. Grand jury subpoenas are going undelivered. Confidential sources are being lost. It's quickly becoming a national security threat. This is America? This is the country I'm proud to serve? Either the president doesn't understand the harm his shutdown is causing, or he doesn't care. But the country is suffering, our economy is suffering, the American people are suffering, and the Trump shutdown makes us look foolish and weak to the rest of the world. And so the leader of the free world, we're seen as weak and incompetent. Now, over the weekend, the president addressed the country from the treaty room at the White House. And he laid out his price to stop the shutdown. Calling it a compromise, he made vague promises of protection for DACA recipients and those at TPS, those who receive temporary protected status. We could end the shutdown. He said all U.S. taxpayers had to do was fund his wall, a wasteful monument to himself. He just wants the taxpayers to fund it, even though he gave his word over and over again to all America that Mexico would pay for it. Well, he didn't tell the truth there, and now he wants the American taxpayers to bail him out. It was a transparent attempt to look reasonable on national television while simultaneously holding the federal government and millions of Americans hostage to a shutdown that harms our economy and our communities every day. But offering temporary protection for vulnerable immigrants, protections that he unilaterally chose to strip in the first place in exchange for a permanent, ineffective wall, nobody can call that reasonable. And it's hardly reasonable to use the well-being of our federal workforce or the services upon which many in America rely as hostages to fund a pet project. The president can't bargain with something that he broke. Now, on Monday night, Senate Republicans unveiled the president's plan in more detail. And it became clear that what had seemed like a disingenuous ploy to seem reasonable and stop his slide in the polls was really a much more cynical attempt to implement his hardline, anti-immigration agenda using the harm of the Trump shutdown as leverage. The McConnell bill before us reads like an A through Z immigration wish list for President Trump and those in his inner circle who are so anti-immigrant. First, the bill provides $5.7 billion for a wasteful monument to the president's ego, a wall that most experts say would do little to address the real problems on our southern border. The bill also dramatically increases the number of immigration and customs enforcement, or so-called ICE detention beds, to 52,000, and ICE enforcement agents by 2,000. And even as I give these numbers, Madam President, I think of walking through these rooms where these cages are that children are being kept in. Every one of us who've had children or grandchildren, every one of us who've gone to a schoolyard, you see young children, the decibel level is outstanding. They're laughing, they're playing, they're talking with each other. You go through these cages holding these young, innocent children, and there's dead silence, no laughter, no talking to each other, no joking, dead silence. This is America. What are we showing the rest of the world? But the Trump administration has repeatedly proven it does not know how to prioritize its immigration enforcement resources. In the first 14 months of the Trump administration, ICE's arrest of immigrants with no criminal convictions, spiked by 203% over the last 14 months of the previous administration. So it shows that President Trump is not deploying resources to round up, as he says, bad hombres or threats to our national security. He's deploying his enforcement resources to strike fear into the hearts of all undocumented immigrants. This administration's enforcement policies are driven by the cruel desire to scare undocumented immigrants into believing that they, or their disabled children, or their elderly parents could be next. And until the Trump administration changes its dragnet approach to immigration enforcement, Congress should not fund an expansion of its detention and deportation force. I would ask anybody, walk past those cages with the children. I never thought I'd see this in America. I've seen it in war zones in other countries, but not America, not the America I love. And the bill also contains provisions that serve as fig leaves to fix problems the Trump administration brought about in the first place. It provides 3 years of temporary protection to 700,000 individuals currently enrolled in DACA. Well, that's protection that's only required because of the president's own decision to terminate the DACA program. It would not provide a path to citizenship for these dreamers or any protections to the nearly 1 million more individuals who are eligible for DACA protections. Similarly, the bill would provide 3 years of temporary protection to TPS recipients from a few countries whose TPS designation the Trump administration terminated in the first place. If you provide permanent funding for a wall in exchange for provisions that temporarily clean up messes of the Trump administration's own making, that's not a compromise. It's taking hostages on top of hostages. It's a non-starter. Stripping away protections from dreamers and TPS recipients and then treating them like pawns by suddenly offering them temporary reprieve, this is not compassionate. It's callous. It's wicked. It's evil. And finally, the bill seeks to dismantle our humanitarian asylum system as we know it. It contains provisions that would effectively bar any asylum applications from Honduran, Guatemalan, and Salvadoran minors. They're not made from a designated processing center somewhere in Central America. In other words, the many thousands of vulnerable children fleeing the horrors of torture, murder, and rape in the Northern Triangle and arriving at our border would be categorically barred from applying for asylum and be subject to immediate removal proceedings. But the entire point of asylum is to provide an opportunity for those who have fled persecution and violence to seek refuge in our country. Our asylum system would become distorted beyond recognition if instead we punish these desperate children, punish them for the very act of fleeing for their lives. It is remarkable that the man whose name is on the book, Art of the Deal, would think that Democrats would accept what amounts to a deal breaker. This Democrat will not. I welcome a debate on the need for immigration reform. I would remind senators that in 2013, when I was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, I ushered a bipartisan bill to reform our immigration system and secure our border through the committee. We held dozens of hearings. We considered hundreds of amendments. We often met until late at night. And then when he brought it to the floor of the Senate, it got 68 votes here on the Senate floor. Republicans and Democrats joined together to give it a supermajority. So it shows it can be done, but not while the president holds hostage all Americans, including hundreds of thousands of federal workers and their families. And I'd remind the Senate that on December 19th, when Republicans and Democrats, and when Republicans controlled the House, Republicans controlled the Senate passed a bipartisan bill to fund the government by voice vote. In other words, the Senate was for keeping the government open until President Trump changed the mind of our Republican leaders. Now, the President and the Senate Republicans should reopen the government now, without any further foot dragging. Congress and the Senate are a co-equal and independent branch of government. We have bipartisan bills before Congress right now to do that. My friend, the majority leaders refuse to bring them up while the country pays the price. This has to end. I hope you'll pull up the bipartisan bills. I hope you'll let us vote. Again, I would say we are looking weak to the rest of the world. We are looking foolish to the rest of the world. But what hurts the most are the people, not only federal employees, but contractors, private industry, and everybody else in every one of our states who are suffering and out of jobs and watching our economy sink further as a result. Madam President, I see the distinguished majority leader on the floor, and so I will yield the floor and ask consent to all my remarks be in the record.